I think we got it.
Never ending story.
There is no way in hell I would ever pull that one off.
Why?
My voice isn't high. It's not loud enough, and it's not mellow enough for that. I'm too harsh. So anyhow, welcome.
Hello. Welcome. My name is Michelle Moras. We are Denim and Pearls, so welcome to Denim and Pearls. We are business casual. Hold on, I messed up.
You totally.
Welcome to Denim and Pearls.
You haven't even started drinking yet.
My name is Michelle Moras, and this is
Brian Swanson.
We are business casual with pearls of
wisdom
from the porch.
You totally. Anyhow, you all know who we are. This is Michelle. I'm Brian. We are pearls. See, I can't even do it now.
See,
business casual with pearls of wisdom
from the porch.
From the porch. And there's always a story to everything.
Yes, and the story right now is Michelle's a little loopy.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
But our topic today is the
never-ending story. You all remember that movie
so
with the trail and his magic dragon thingy that he flew around.
Was that it? No, trail. What was the name of the dog?
The flying dog?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
I don't either. It was the flying dog.
Yeah, but I remember a trail because I met him at one of your
Galaxy Fest.
Galaxy Fest.
I know.
Yes. So
I know a few people who fell in love with him too.
Oh, really?
Oh, they were in love with him before he got here. Then when he got here, he's such a nice guy that
he was so cute too. Anyways, so never-ending story. Well, I asked Brian that we talk about the never-ending story because we all have our own stories. We all have our stories about how we view life, and everyone sees everything different. And what brought this idea up is I was thinking, when we were kids, we used to play a game where we'd all get in a circle in school, in the classroom, and the teacher would say, "Let's start a rumor."
By the way, I've never heard of this story.
Really? And the teacher would whisper something in the first person's ear. And the whole game was every person would whisper something else in the next person's ear. And by the time it came all the way around the circle, the story had changed. So she could have just started with Johnny has a brown nose. And the next thing you know, when it comes all the way around the circle, Johnny has a dog that is brown and lives in a farm. You're like, where did that come from? But it's how people perceive the words that they hear, or how, what if, you've heard it. It's all about perception. We've talked about that a lot.
Well, it's also part of what we hear too. I mean, what's the thing? It's like 23% of everything that you hear, you actually retain. Like when you go to a conference or something like that, where even if the speaker is magnificent, think about this, true. You can actually do the experiment by yourself. Listen to the speaker and then explain what the speaker said. And that speaker just spoke for 45 minutes and you've got 3 sentences, maybe, that you can tell that story.
They said their name is this, and they're really fun to watch. And
you remember one sentence or one concept that they took out of the whole thing. It's just like watching a movie.
So
at least it is for me, because I when it comes to a movie, I watch a movie, I get done with it, and then I have a tendency to just shut it down and put it on the back burner.
He's horrible, because I'll say, "Oh, this movie when that scene happened," and then he is, "Nope, I do." You haven't seen Top Gun? He is, "I did."
Yeah, 14 times.
Don't you remember when they said this?
Yeah, exactly, and that's the way I remember movies, because I guess it's one of those really weird things. Part of my story, if you will. I don't retain it unless there was something that really out and I was attached to.
In other words, if you give him a history channel, he'll remember everything. If you tell him put him on a car channel, he'll remember everything about every car that was shown.
Not
but
true,
you put him on anything else and he just, nope, don't remember it.
Well, okay, so how many schools did you go to when you were a kid? Let's just say high schools. How many high schools did you go to?
2.
Okay, and how many of those, out of those 2 high schools, how many friends do you remember?
Oh, probably about 100.
You think you remember them all?
Yeah.
And stories behind all of them and what kind of friendship you had and all that stuff?
That's how my brain works.
See, mine doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Mine goes with only the important people,
and see,
or what my brain thought was important.
Well, and with
people.
me, I remember their face, what they did, what sport they played, what instrument they played. I remember all of that, but I won't remember the name.
Oh yeah, there's that too. Usually I can remember the name faster, but I mean, sit down and go through your yearbook one day. Just your senior yearbook. And me, it's really terrible because I went to so many different
Yeah, you had
schools.
like four, didn't you?
Probably four. Yeah, I think it was four. I don't know. I never really counted. But if I can go through the book and I can go. I remember that person and that person and that person and that person. But can I really tell you their stories? Can I really tell you why I knew them?
I remember stories.
I with the prompts like that, I might be able to, but to come up with it off the top of my head.
Yeah, and I'll say, "Oh, your brother did this." Da, da. I mean, I've had people where I haven't seen them since we were like 9, and I'm thinking of one guy in particular, and we connected on Facebook, and we were talking one day, and we got on a call, and he said, "How do you remember me?" And I said, "Well, I remember you sitting in the 100 ward wing, and you're on the corner, and you had your backpack on the floor, and you had your arms crossed, and you were just the sweetest guy with the big eyes. And I remember thinking how quiet you are." He goes, "How do you remember all that?" I do. "I can see you vividly in my head. I have a visual memory." So
I think it's girls that can do that.
Maybe.
Because they always want to know, do you remember what I was wearing on my first date?
I don't remember that.
You don't remember what you were wearing on Michael's first date, your first official date?
Nope.
Or what you were wearing when you got married, or when he gave you your first kiss and all this?
Nope.
That's usually what the girls will remember.
I don't remember any of that.
See? And it's not because it wasn't important.
No, all I remember about when I first met my future husband was that he was awkward, looked different than everyone else, and I knew he was going to be the one I was going to marry. And I knew that at 14.
Yeah, but you remember he was right. Didn't you say the story about he was riding a bike or something and you drove by or rode
Oh,
by
no,
on
no.
a
The
bicycle?
first time I saw him, he was walking to cross country practice. I can tell you what he was wearing. I can tell you how the leaves were moving around him. I remember everything about him on that moment. And so it's crazy how my mind.
Do you remember what day?
It was a Thursday because I remember complaining that school started on Thursday. And they said, "Oh, we start on Thursday because you have your first day of getting to know everything. Friday is your first day of real classes, and then you prepare, and then Monday started class." So I remember it was a Thursday.
See, I can tell you, it's a girl thing. Because you asked my wife when we first met, she could probably tell you everything. I do remember when we first met, though, actually. I do actually remember.
I think the first time I met Michael, I actually spoke to him, I was in school, and the boy I was dating at the time was leaning in front of me, and Michael walked by and said, "Take a cold shower, get a room,"
Get a room.
and walked away. And I'm like, huh? Yeah.
And you didn't understand what that meant.
No, I didn't.
I was going to say gullible. That's not the word I was looking for.
I was naive.
Naive, yes.
Yes, I had no idea what he meant by that. And there's so many things that I remember. But what I was getting on with the never ending story is that we all have stories in our head. So, like with me, my story in my head was I was not a pretty person, and that no one would ever love me because I wasn't good enough. Or some other people, like maybe you, say I'm not good at math. Or what I meet now, I'm not good at public speaking. And I listened to these stories, and I, where did that story originate? And so one of my clients, one of the people who came to my speaker boot camp earlier in the year, she said, "Oh, I'm not good at public speaking. I don't speak in front of people." And I said, "Where did you start that story?" And she says, "Oh, well, I used to love, doing spelling bees and da 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 da. And then one day I was in front of the spelling bee, and I was down to the last 5, and I spelled the word wrong, and people laughed." And I said, "Oh, really?" She says, "So I can't do that. I don't spell well, and I don't speak in front of people anymore." And I'm like, "So was it that you can't speak in front of people, or because you were embarrassed, you don't want to be in front of people anymore?" And she went, "Ah."
Embarrassed and scared.
Yes. So her story that she had been telling herself for 40 some odd years was, "I'm not good at spelling because I made it to the top 5 of the spelling bee and failed at that 5th. Okay, lady, I couldn't even get into the top 200. And so what she had geared in her mind was that she wasn't a good speller and she couldn't be in front of people. It was a narrative that she put in her head in order to protect herself from the embarrassment that she felt at that moment. So what story are you telling? If you say you're bad at math, is it because you got an F on one of your tests when you're in 7th grade and you just locked it in your head? "Oh, I'm not good at math." And for the rest of your life, you didn't allow yourself to get any better at math.
Well, I mean, I've got a story too. I keep thinking about, but relating the story of things changing and remembering things the way that you thought that they happened,
Mm-hmm.
the rationalization that you either somehow your brain put the news story in your mind
Oh yeah.
because you saw it one way when it possibly happened. That's why we have problems when it comes to people being witnesses to certain
Everyone sees something different.
somebody stealing a bicycle. The story is all different because everybody sees it differently, and your brain turns around and puts what you think should have happened or whatever. And a perfect example, I had a fourth grade teacher, loved him to death. Daniel Selos was his name, and he moved like near the end of the school year or something like this. Well, for some reason, I remember him telling the class that he was going to quit teaching and go raise popcorn. Now, that sounds weird, but this was in Indiana, and we raise a lot of popcorn in Indiana.
Okay.
Popcorn is separate from regular corn.
Yes,
It's its own
it's a
thing.
different
If you
kind.
didn't know that, it's its own thing. Okay. Its own breed or whatever. So that's what I grew up with remembering since the fourth grade. Well, I literally talked to him probably about 10 years ago. It just happened to. And I said, so whatever happened with the popcorn farm thing?
And he said, "What are you talking
He
about?"
says, what the hell are you talking about?
So what did he say?
He actually did. He says, I think where you might have gotten it was he went on some kind of a vacation and he actually visited a popcorn field farm.
Oh, and you pushed it together.
I somehow pushed it together because what he actually ended up doing, which is what he does to this day, as far as I'm aware, was staying within the educational field and ended up being a principal of a couple different schools over the years and different things like that. So he totally stayed within education. He never went to raise popcorn. But somehow my brain had always put that together. And I've told that story forever. I've told people about my favorite teacher always he
became a popcorn
became
farmer.
a popcorn farmer. And it wasn't true.
Well, and I was thinking, like with me, I made up a story in my head. I was in a car accident before the big one. It was another car accident. And I'm on this overpass. And I remember seeing a car rushing towards me. He was not slowing down. Oh, I'm moving. He was not slowing down. And when he hit me from behind, he pushed my car into the truck in front of me. And the truck in front of me had a piece of wood sticking out the back, and it was headed to the inside of my car. But when we sat around and we waited for the police, and the policeman came, and then I was out of the car and everything.
Okay, so you're on life number 4.
Yeah, the policeman comes over and he says, "So what happened?" I said, "I was terrified because I saw him coming at me, and it looked like he was coming at me at 70 miles an hour. So I put my foot on the brake, and I was waiting for the hit, and I was so afraid that he was going to knock me over the overpass into the traffic below the overpass." And I had in my head where I was, what was happening, everything. And the police is like, "Oh, wow, okay, well, good thing you're not hurt, blah, blah, blah." Well, when we had to do all the file reports and we were looking at all the pictures, I hadn't even made it onto the freeway yet. I didn't even make it over I wasn't on the overpass. I was on the flat part right before the overpass. But in my mind, I saw him coming at me at the light. I saw the overpass, and in my mind, I had moved my car onto the overpass, and that the way he was hitting me, he was going to hit me and knock me over. I was nowhere near it. I would have went into the grass. So my mind had a story of, when you're on overpasses, be very careful. So with me, when I'm on an overpass, even to this day, I always go into the fast lane, and I stay in the fast lane until I'm over the overpass to the other side. Why? Because my brain says if you're on the right side, closer to the edge, if you get hit, you're going to go over the side. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, considering there's usually not a way for somebody to hit you there, but okay.
Exactly. I was at the light before it. But in my mind, because it was such a scary moment in time, my mind moved me to the worst case scenario, and that's what I thought was happening. I was in no danger of ever being pushed over an edge. I would have been pushed into grass on the side.
Well, it kind of goes back to, I mean, there's extremes in different things, and I'm thinking of the story that my birth mom told me about when I was conceived and different things like that. She didn't have a lot of recollection of anything. She had suppressed those thoughts. And that's actually why once I met her, it took me 10 years to get any information out of her enough to find my birth father.
Mhm.
So it's she's at that extreme where she didn't have an accident. She didn't have all any of that kind of stuff or a reason for it. It was just such a traumatic story to her because she had to give her kid up, yada yada yada. But it was such a tragic story to her that she
She
had
blocked it.
suppressed and blocked all of that information. I mean, that's like crazy. So her story, it grew over 10 years.
And so, what story are you telling yourself? What are you preventing yourself from doing because of a story that your mind has created so big that you can't find the real story? And you don't
Well,
even know what the real
you're
story
probably
is
not going
anymore.
to, we also had a conversation one time about obvious, and this may not be obvious. You may not know what that story is until something triggers that emotion that's tied to that story.
Mhm.
Because every story that we have is actually it's tied to an emotion, and that's what happens with a lot of. And I'm going to go really serious on this, but that's what happens to a lot of PTSD folks
Mhm.
is the incident and the emotions that are attached to it. And I had a person that we used to network with, and she was like a hypnosis person, hypnotic, what hypnotist, and she would literally work with PTSD folks to separate the emotion from the story.
Yep.
That way, the person could. She had like a 90% success rate
Mhm.
with this.
Well, it's very helpful if you have a story in your head that's holding you back, and you need someone to talk to. You need to find someone to talk to, like a counselor, someone who can guide you through. Because that's if you ever watch me speak on stage and I tell these stories, you're like, "Don't you have a brain injury?" Well, I do. But what happened is I went to a counselor and we worked through a lot of my stories, and we pulled the emotion away from that whatever
Right.
state that happened, and I saw the story like a movie, what was happening to me, and I could see it objectively. So now I know what happened without the freak out part.
It's like watching a movie and taking away the soundtrack.
Yeah.
Or the noise track.
Yeah,
It
because
doesn't. It's just not the same. The story's there, but there's nothing there to trigger the emotions.
haven't you seen movies where they say it's all in the soundtrack, and the soundtrack is your mind, the emotional state is your
Mhm.
soundtrack. And there are reels out there, you can probably Google it and say movies without sound or movies with the wrong soundtrack. And like the scene of Darth Vader becoming whatever,
Right.
they put it like love music in, and suddenly he's not turning into a monster, he's coming back to life to be a good
Well, it's like I
person.
saw a reel yesterday, I think it was, and they took I can't remember who the band was. It was like It wasn't Metallica, but it was some death metal band, and they put it up against the film for Matilda. Total match.
Yeah.
It was totally awesome on what they had done. But I also had another realization too.
What?
You watch too many reels in TikTok. You spend too much time in the airport.
I spend a lot of time in airports. And it's funny because now that TikToks and all those things show up on Facebook, I'm like checking on Facebook because I do. And then the reel pops up, and then you watch the next one, you watch the next one. Like, I need to get on
Yeah,
an
by the
airplane.
next thing, 45 minutes are gone.
Yes.
It's definitely one way to pass time.
But a never ending story, and we all have them. Some of them hold us back. Some of them make us afraid to do the things we're supposed to do in this world for ourselves and to make the world a better place.
And sometimes we relive those stories too. I mean,
Over
let's
and
kind of go
over
that way.
and over and
And a
over.
lot of times they're negative.
Yes.
We see a lot of people out there that they cannot get over some tragic event. I've got something in my head specifically, but some tragic event that may have happened 15 or 20 or 30 years ago, and they relive that story every single day.
Yeah. Well,
that's a never-ending story.
I mean, that's how I met Brian, because I was avoiding my never-ending story, and in my never-ending story, he's a bad guy. And so
Does this face look like a bad
so
guy?
I had to look at all of it from another perspective to realize this is a narrative that I've been playing in my head to fear anyone that looks like Brian.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to pull back and do, that is irrational. I mean, the same person cannot be duplicated over and over and over and over again. They're unique people. And so I let my narrative hold back a friendship because of what I expected him to do.
The
Not
obvious.
what, yeah, the obvious what I was expecting him to do, because that's what he does, And I had to replay, pull it out, and do, wait a minute, this is wrong. I am judging him off of a narrative in my head that is actually should be applied to only one person, but I was applying it to him. Are you doing that to someone in your life? Are you doing it to your clients? Do you see someone walk into here's another. I go to a fancy art studio or something like that. Come in with messy clothes, don't look like you have any money. Watch how they treat you. They have a narrative in their head of who will buy. Who will buy this wonderful morning? You have a story about that, like with your car.
Well, there was one.
Yeah.
There is one about my car.
Yeah.
That Julie and I went looking for a car one time. The wife and I went looking for a car one time, and I was looking specifically at what we could do with our family because we had 2 kids, one extra one on the way, and yet a long story there. But we went in looking for something, and BMW had just came out, reintroduced a station wagon. So we went to the car dealership, get out of the car, and the guy says, "What are you looking for?" I said, "Well, I want to look at this new BMW. Whatchamacallit?" He looks at me and tells me I can't afford his car.
Because he judged him.
Because I was wearing a T-shirt and jeans or whatever I was wearing at the time, and driving. I was actually driving a Grand Prix at the time, which at that time was a nice car. So I don't know whatever happened with that. But I got back in the car, and Julie's like, "Why are you so upset?" So I explained to her. I says, "He just told me I can't afford his cars." I says, I can afford any blankety blank car he has on this lot. I don't care what it takes to do it. The only question is, can I afford the insurance afterwards? Because that it becomes a whole other story when you start figuring that in.
But the story was.
But don't tell me I can't afford something.
The person selling the car had a narrative in his head. Mm-hmm. He had in his head who would buy.
What a BMW owner looks like.
And so when he showed up in a T-shirt, he lost a sale because he judged somebody by his own narrative. And that's why I was getting back to your business. What are you prejudging in your head that who would work with you? There are so many people who do things like, oh, well, they're never going to work with me because. No, you don't know their situation. Or in the speaker world that I'm in, people say, oh, well, I wanted to charge this, but I'm going to lower my price because I don't think the people can really afford that. And I do. Don't tell them what they can afford. They will tell you what they can afford.
Well, I mean, we're totally going off on a little bit of a tangent.
No, it's stories.
Because I'm also thinking of the fact that in business, and especially if you own your own business, you have a brick and mortar, or you're going to go on Etsy. What do you charge for your product?
Oh, you're going the other way. Okay.
Well, that's part of it too, because we all have in our mind that we want to be fair to our customers. But on the other side of it too, we don't rationalize the fact that there's the other side of the story, that we don't rationalize that if we sell it at that discounted of a price, that we're going to go out of business. We're not going to make the money we need to sustain.
Well, I was thinking your story about when you had the comic book store and one of your people who worked in the store with you prejudged a man that came in looking pretty sloppy, looking at a very expensive piece.
Right.
And when they dismissed him and he walked out, Brian followed him out and found out this man.
I was actually sitting outside in front of the door, and she said something to the husband about, I don't know where the hell they get off talking about that I can't afford anything. Whoa, stop. Excuse me, I'm the owner. What did you just say? Needless to say, my, let's call them employees at this point, were very well schooled in that tactic.
Never judge a book by its cover.
Never, because you just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, there is another individual. It wasn't specifically that was one story, but there was another individual who used to come into the store. He'd come in about every 2 months or so, riding on a moped, and he looked like he didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. His moped looked like he probably parked it in the woods somewhere because he'd on the street, whatever. But he would come in about every 2 months and spend $200 to $300. So if I would have judged that individual coming in the door the first day even though I did judge him, but I didn't put the judgment on him. Like there's a big difference there. He didn't have, or I mean, he had the money to spend. I could have been out all that money for all those months.
Well, I don't know if you're having the same issue on your end, but our video has slowed down because I'm talking, and on the video, Brian's still talking.
I think it'll be fine. We'll find out.
Okay. So here's the thing. We all have stories that we tell ourselves. What are you telling yourself? And is it holding you back from your future? If we go into the relationship side, what story are you saying? Like, I hear this all the time. There are no good men left.
Oh, he's too good for me.
He's too good for me.
There's other. They're all either married or we all know that one.
Yeah. And then you hear men say, well, you know, all women want are bad boys. Well, what you're doing is you're putting into the world, into the universe, to the cosmos. That's all you're going to get. You will only meet the ones who are taken. You will only meet the ones who are the bad boys. You will only.
Mm-hmm.
We get what we ask for. Why? It's just like that whole theory about you're going to buy a new car and you've checked it all out. You decided you're going to get a white whatever. And you buy the car. You've never think no one else has it. And as soon as you drive it off the lot, every car you see is the car you just bought that you thought no one else had.
Exactly. It's always that way.
What you focus on, you get. So whatever story you're telling yourself, if you don't like the story, like in the Never Ending Story song, Never Ending Story, it says, show no fear because it may fade away, but every day is a chance to make a new story. So if you are being held back in some way, shape, or form, change your narrative, change your story, and you'll start seeing something different.
Well, it's like I've walked into networking groups and I meet somebody and I say, good morning. Even though it's at 5 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock at night, I'll say good morning. And they look at me funny. And they like, what do you mean it's like 7 o'clock at night? I'm like, well, every minute's a new minute. So every day's a new day. So good morning.
Oh, that's sweet.
It's kind of a silly little technical thing going on there, but really and truly, I mean, if you think about it, every minute is a new minute. Every day is a new day. Your story, no matter what it is, can be changed. You don't have to relive those stories. Now, back to where we started that part. There are exceptions to that rule. Okay, I understand. I don't want to put anybody down in any kind of mental health kind of a thing here. But we have the opportunity every single day to change our story.
And it doesn't have to be a big change. It could be an itty bitty change.
Or improve upon our story.
Yes.
Not necessarily change, but improve upon our story.
It can be done, and you can't look at us and say, they don't know what they're talking about. Go watch my old videos on YouTube.
Excuse me.
Are you okay? So every day is a chance to make a change. It can be a small one. It can be a big one. The small ones are easier to make. And if you're scared about changing that story, one tiny change. And every day, add another tiny change. And the next thing you know, you've changed your story. So
I think we need to roll.
We are Denim and Pearls. My name is Michelle Moras.
And I'm Brian Swanson.
We are business casual with
Pearls of Wisdom.
From the porch. Go change your story. Your never-ending story can be a beautiful one.
Change your story, change your life.
Ooh, I like that.
Ooh.
Peace.
I'm sure somebody said that somewhere.
Yes.
Where's it at? There we go. Peace.